Hello. No one expects minus 10 degrees, but that's exactly what happened to us on our road trip from Cornwall to Scotland. And if you're wondering how it affected the range and our trip, doing it under 24 hours, then please stick around. Earlier, I thought 1 degree was going to be pretty bad, not knowing how bad it was going to be. Minus 10 degrees is pretty extreme, so please stick around. You'll hear our story. Hello, booked a trip to the Orkneys a few weeks ago, because then it wasn't 1 degree or minus 1 degree, which it is now. And although Orkney Isles is warmer than Cornwall, England, Manchester, Scotland definitely isn't. It's sort of minus 3-4 degrees. Now this is going to be a really good test for the Tesla Model 3 to see how we get on. We're driving sort of late afternoon through the night, lots and lots of superchargers on the way, probably going to do at least 2,000 miles, so hope you can please stick around and see how we get on. So I'm going to put in the GPS, Gills Bay, that's the ferry that goes to the Orkney Isles, and we are stopping, and it clearly shows where the stops are. First is Michael Wood, and we will be 18% when we get there. It's 146 miles. The one after that supercharger is Arnock Richard, and then we can then from there it's Abington, been there a few times before, and then we go all the way up to Aviemore in Inverness, because that's the last one before we get to Gills Bay. It's quite a long way from Inverness to Gills Bay. There are no superchargers, that's the last one, and then there are some destination chargers on the Orkney Isles, so we just want to see how that works out. So currently it's saying there's going to be 4 stops before we get to the top of the UK in Scotland, Gills Bay, but of course it works it out. That's based on the history that I've done in the car recently. Of course we're going to be going on motorways a lot, probably be doing about 70, so that might change to 5 stops. I know this happened when I was on the Orkney Islands. I looked, I put in to come home and it suggested 4, but it increased it to 5, because once you're on the motorway, it's not as efficient and it may need a further stop. Now fortunately there are lots and lots of places to stop, so the 4 stops I'm stopping at, if I do need to stop elsewhere, I've got many options. So we're just heading off now on our mammoth journey. We're down in Cornwall, heading up to Scotland. It's almost Land's End to John O Groats, but not quite. We're about 80 miles from Land's End, heading up towards Gills Bay, which is very close to John O Groats. And we're taking the ferry to Orkney at 9:30 tomorrow morning. It's now just gone 3. So we're hoping to get to Gills Bay in the early hours of the morning, perhaps 7 or 8, something like that. Maybe have a doze on the way. Lots of stops. Our next stop is Michael Wood Services in a couple of hours' time. Are you looking forward to this, Jennifer?
I am, yes.
Oh, that's good.
I haven't been to the Orkney Islands, so looking forward to seeing them.
That's great. Thank you. We were certainly not expecting minus 10 degrees, but that's exactly what happened to us at the Highlands at its peak. The average temperature was between -5 and -8 that night on much of our Cornwall to John O Groats road trip. I'll tell you exactly how it affected the range of the Tesla Model 3 in very extreme conditions. When we booked the trip early December, the weather was normal, around 8-10 degrees. And the earlier video was one that I did just the day before, when the temperature was down to about -1 degrees, and I wondered then how the Tesla was going to react to -1 conditions, never knowing how bad it was going to get. As John Lennon says, life is what happens when you're planning other things, and it will make the video a lot more interesting. The Devon roads were worse than Cornwall where we live. The scenery was very pretty and white, but luckily the roads were nice and wet and not frozen. The first Tesla supercharger we had to stop at was at Michael Wood, where we had a KFC evening meal, and it's about a 5-minute walk from the main services from the Tesla superchargers. Arnock Richard was the next planned stop according to the Tesla GPS. was 164 miles away, and it was predicting only 5% range when we got there. And so we stopped at the Kiel supercharger, as I felt 5% leaves no margin for error in the below frozen conditions. And sometimes the GPS needs to be overridden when the destination percentage is low in extreme conditions, and allowing for any unexpected delays or diversions. I don't want to be that EV driver that runs out of an EV charge. I really don't. It's true, I've run out of petrol a few times, but I don't want to run out of charge. There'll be too many people saying, electric cars, you know, you have to buy one. So we stopped at Kiel, then Charnock Richard, Gretna Green and Perth, and the GPS predicting arriving in time for the ferry at 8 a.m. and the ferry left at 9:30, so that was good. And then we saw an amazing shooting star, and that's always nice to see, so I'll show it twice. It was just before we passed Aviemore we got to minus 10 degrees. Although the roads were dry and it wasn't snowing then, it stayed at minus 10 for about 10 minutes and then went back to minus 9, minus 10, and I think it got to minus 7. After Inverness, the conditions worsened with freezing rain. The windscreen washers froze. And the windscreen got very, very dirty with grit on the road. Tailgating delivery vans were appalling, and the GPS predicted arriving 5 minutes late for the ferry, but in the worsening road conditions meant we were over an hour late. When the GPS is predicting your arrival only 5 minutes after the ferry leaves, there is just no time for any filming. You just want to try and make it on time, and often ferries are late. Closer to John O Groats, the GPS sent us down a small, ungritted road, and as I turned around, realising I'm not going down this road any further, it's going to be a nightmare, especially if there was any slight hills. I did get stuck in the snow turning around, but fortunately there were two locals passing in cars who nipped out and gave us a bit of a push, but that was quite worrying. I certainly wasn't expecting that. We missed the ferry by an hour. We learned later if we had phoned Pentland Ferries, we wouldn't have to pay for the next ferry, but as it was, we had to pay an extra £78. So that's worth knowing. If you're going to be late for the ferry, or even if you think you are, just phone ahead and say you might be late and save yourself £78. Unfortunately, the midday ferry was cancelled, so we had to wait to the evening ferry. So we spent most of the day in John O Groats. Down at the ferry terminal is a Charge Place Scotland. So I thought, okay, we'll charge up. I'm always raving about how good they are, but it wouldn't accept my card. So I phoned them up and they told me I had to register a direct debit details of my bank, which I had done originally back in May, and I had used it a number of times. I didn't think to check it before I left. I wish I could, because when you're running out of data on your phone and the charge on your phone is getting low, it's quite difficult, and when reception isn't very good for Wi-Fi, it's quite difficult to do these things. It's easy at home, but in those stressful conditions of having missed the boat, needing charge for the car, it can get a bit stressful, and these are reasons why I always have a backup. But I know that between Inverness and the top of Scotland, there are no Tesla superchargers. That's why Charge Place Scotland, when it's accepting my card, is fantastic. However, I did realise, looking at the ZapMap app, there was a grid serve at John O Groats. Of course, all grid serves are contactless. I've used them on the motorway and they're quite excellent. So eventually when we found it, we were able to charge fully, and so that was a bit of a relief. So we slept in a lay-by for an hour or so. We caught the ferry to Cornwall and had to book into a hotel for the night. Now in the morning we're on the 7:40 ferry to Sandy, so that was great news. I love the North Isles ferries as they remind me of the Isle of Wight car ferries in the 1960s. What is the real-life range of the Tesla Model 3 in sub-zero temperatures between -10 and -2 degrees? Well, the energy watts per mile was 292, giving a real-world sub-zero temperature range on my 50 kilowatt battery of 171 miles on a full charge. When fully charged, the Tesla touchscreen shows 255 miles in perfect warm conditions. My average since owning the car was 238 watts per mile, giving me a real world range of 210 miles on a full charge. So the car lost 41 miles of my average in the sub-zero temperatures, and of course that was below what Tesla predict in perfect conditions. But it's not exactly true, as most of the journey was at 70 miles an hour, and that kind of driving is not favoured by EVs. But driving on Sandy Island today, from a cold start, I managed 280 watts per mile. That equates to 178 miles range. But the battery was very cold, and when it warmed up, I got up to 247 watts per mile, giving me a range of 202 miles. That was with the heater on high, and I know that I can do much better than that when the conditions are a lot warmer. Although 170 miles in a Tesla Model 3 that is supposed to do 255 on a full charge is not good, there are plenty of Tesla superchargers throughout the length and breadth of Britain. There isn't one from Inverness to the top of Scotland, but it's only about 150 miles and well within range. Hope you found this interesting, and we'll be posting more videos on our trip on Sandy Islands and the main island, and also we'll be driving back. Hopefully it'll be slightly warmer. What do you think? Please leave a comment below. Hope you could like if you did, and please subscribe. And please don't forget to take your reusable mug wherever you go. Thanks for watching. Take care. See you next time. Bye.